Now that everyone is back in their seats, we'll begin the first of the two panel discussions. The first has a theme of the significance, challenges, and future prospects of multi-layered international exchange. Moderating this discussion is Aiko Doden, journalist and Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Reischauer Center for East Asian Studies at Johns Hopkins University. Ms. Doden is a renowned journalist and researcher specializing in international affairs and Indo-Pacific strategy. Until 2024, she was a senior commentator at NHK, known for her expertise spanning hard security to human security issues. Further cementing her influence in global affairs, Ms. Doden served as professor of practice at SOAS, University of London, and sits on the boards of notable organizations, including UNESCO Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development. I'll now turn the time over to her to introduce each panelist and begin this section of the program.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and a warm welcome to this panel, the first panel for the afternoon. My name is Aiko Doden, Distinguished Senior Fellow at the Reischauer Center, Johns Hopkins University, also a Japan Foundation Indo-Pacific Partnership Program Fellow. And as introduced until last year, I was a commentator at NHK, Japan Broadcasting Corporation, and I am honored to be the moderator for the two consecutive panels this afternoon in my new capacity as a researcher. International exchange is a topic that I have felt very strongly about throughout my career, and I am happy to be on the same panel with friends and leaders that I know well. And as distinguished speakers have already articulated earlier, international exchange forms the foundation at all levels of the long-lasting bond of friendship and cooperation between Japan and the United States. And it is something that requires work on both sides, just like maintaining an alliance. So for our first panel, we have representatives from the civil society organization that are doing excellent work in nurturing and strengthening the bond of friendship through international exchange. And for the second panel, we have key figures representing the government in both countries with expertise on these issues. The organizer and myself discussed and decided to build the program this way, consisting of two panels so that our conversation will be focused and interactive. And at a time of global uncertainties, we are well aware of the challenges, but it gives us all the more reasons to ask why international exchange matters and how to forge the way forward and what future we envision together. Following this panel, on the second panel, we will follow up on some of the key points raised in this first panel. So I do hope that our distinguished panelists for the second panel pay close attention to this panel, not only because I will be asking the questions later, but because I believe issues are interrelated. So let me introduce our panelists to you, and I will do it very briefly in the interest of time, and I believe you have their detailed bio with you. To my left is Ricki Garrett, President and CEO, Sister Cities International, headquartered in Washington, D.C. And then next is Frank Jannuzi, President and CEO, Maureen and Mike Mansfield Foundation. And then Kazuyo Kato, Executive Director of JCIE, Japan Center for International Exchange, USA. And she's the individual recipient of the John and Hiroko Malott Leadership Award by the Japan American Society of Washington, D.C. For the work she has done in developing and mentoring the next generation of leaders, very relevant to the topic we'll be discussing. And next is Jessyca Livingston, Executive Director, U.S. JET program, that is, as you all know, Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, Alumni Association, where she leads the organization's mission to strengthen the U.S.-Japan relationship. And I believe JET Alumni Association of Washington, D.C. Was the group recipient of the same award for the work in developing the next generation of leaders in the Japan and in the Japan-U.S. relations. And I think the panelists today know each other quite well, I believe. And they often take part in events and the programs together, and we will be talking about how to further promote that. But first of all, the organizations that you each represent are perhaps well known to the audience gathered today. But perhaps, please, would you walk us through some of the key people-to-people exchange programs you have put on efforts in with references to target groups and how you execute the programs. So Ricki, would you be?
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to be with you today representing Sister Cities International. For those of you who don't know, Sister Cities International was founded by President Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1956 to build peace in the world through citizen diplomacy. And as a wartime general, President Eisenhower knew very well that the only way to have lasting peace in the world was through friendship and through partnerships between cities in the U.S. and cities around the world. And so for almost 70 years, Sister Cities International has been living out President Dwight Eisenhower's dream. And currently there are 431 U.S. cities that are members of Sister Cities International, and those 431 U.S. cities have partnerships numbering 1,800 in 140 countries in the world. We have grown the membership of Sister Cities International by 54% in the last 2.5 years. We've expanded our programming. We have enhanced our visibility, and we have also enhanced our financial security. And you have heard a lot today about the expo in Japan, and in the summer of 2024, Sister Cities International was awarded a grant to recruit and train and manage 89 youth ambassadors who were our host at the U.S. Pavilion at the World Expo in Osaka, Japan. And the U.S. Pavilion actually won the prize for best team for the first time ever in the history of that award. And so that was a significant connection to Japan. And we also have been working on partnerships between the U.S. and the Pacific Islands in collaboration with the State Department. We've just had a huge U.S.-Japan summit in Isumisano, Japan, that brought 561 people to Japan from the U.S. and other countries. And most of all, I think we are focused on growing the next generation of diplomats through our programming at Sister Cities International. We're going to be celebrating our 70th anniversary in the summer of 2026 and bring hundreds of Sister Cities volunteers here to DC to celebrate. But I would just end by saying that every day, every single day, Sister Cities International is reaching out to cities in the U.S. and building partnerships around the world that make a difference every single day in building out President Eisenhower's dream of peace through citizen diplomacy.
Thank you, Ricki. Well, just to follow up, it is about sisters and city versus sister. But I understand people that are involved include like volunteers, artists, students, musicians, and many more.
Yes, Sister Cities is comprised of thousands of volunteers on the ground in cities throughout the United States. And those volunteers are every age group, and they are every profession that you can imagine. And those programs include everything, including educational exchanges for high school and university students, cultural festivals, sports diplomacy, and even economic development projects come out of that.
Very diverse, very diverse. Thank you. Then next is Frank, please.
Thank you so much, Aiko. It's a pleasure to be here. We have grassroots already discussed, cities to city, and I think the Mansfield Foundation is best understood partly as, grass tips. Our work is about weaving the fabric of community across the Pacific, but most of our work centers on investing in people, building networks of problem solvers who can help get things done on tough public policy issues. So this includes our flagship program, the Mansfield Fellowship Program that Ambassador Tong has already described. We have more than 200 alumni of this program across the federal government working on everything from nuclear safety to environmental protection to law enforcement to trade to commerce and technology and cyber, space. And we also train the trainers. We invest in the educators across the United States who are training the next generation of Ezra Vogels and Gerald Curtises and Sheila Smiths, the professors who are inspiring young people to pursue deeper understanding of Asia, especially Japan. And we do this through programs like the Network for the Future, funded by the Japan Foundation, which Aiko Doden has been deeply involved in. I could not be on this stage without at least sharing a couple of pictures to inspire you to come to Montana. So you do see on the stage the beautiful Glacier National Park. The Mansfield Foundation's niche is really inspired very much by Montana. It's blue sky thinking, trying to get beyond the Beltway. And we're weaving that fabric of community across the Pacific, but we also inhabit the halls of power in Washington, D.C., or at least we try to. And so on Capitol Hill, where there is the Mansfield Room, we hold events and we work with Congress and we try to make sure that the leaders of the two countries know each other through fostering exchange programs like the Foley Legislative Exchange, bringing together Diet members and members of Congress on an annual basis to talk about the critical issues of the day. So it's educators, it's government workers, it's leaders. And all of it goes back to Mansfield. Our foundation was created by Congress in 1983 at a time of tension in the U.S.-Japan relationship. Ambassador Mansfield was there in Tokyo navigating a very tough time in the U.S.-Japan relationship. He and his wife Maureen were brilliant in understanding that the best way to strengthen the U.S.-Japan alliance was really to forge deeper personal connections. Part of the way they did that was to inspire Japanese companies to invest in America, to build outposts in the United States, to employ Americans, so that when we think about Toyota now, we don't think about a Japanese company necessarily. We think about the manufacturer of those great pickup trucks that a lot of Texans like to buy, and that are made in Texas for Texans. I'm a little prejudiced there. I'm a Texan, so I have a soft spot for Toyota and Toyota trucks. But Mansfield's values are infused throughout everything we do. He was a very humble guy. He believed in community, including diverse communities, bringing many voices together. He listened intently in order to forge trust. And he didn't impugn the motives of other parties. Part about building peaceful international relations is understanding that for all of our differences, if we approach those differences with a spirit that says, I'm sure you have a good reason for believing what you do. Do you mind telling me what it is? And then let's talk about our differences. Let's work through our differences with a spirit of mutual respect. And that is the way that he forged collaboration, both as a senator and as ambassador between the United States and Japan. I will close by saying that I want to just share something personal. My own life was very much shaped by my parents' early exposure to me to foreign affairs through foreign travel. So I had my first beer in Germany with my dad when I was 15.
Is that allowed?
In Germany, apparently, there's really no age limit. And I had my first noodles, Asian style, as a young student, age 18, in China and Japan, traveling abroad for the first time independently, and discovering a love of Asia that has stuck with me my whole life. Early exposures to foreign cultures, food, languages, that is catalytic. It changes lives. It makes people more confident about their ability to tackle challenges, but it also nurtures curiosity and humility, because you learn what other people do better than you do, or what other nations do differently than you do. And all of these organizations, when we talk about the multi-layered engagement, it's all about that. And I've already taken too much time, so I'll stop there.
Thank you. It's a really multi-layered panel in itself, I thought. Yes. Just to follow up, Frank, the Mansfield Fellows Program, I understand many fellows, they stay in their job, being to be the bridge that they aspire to be.
Thank you so much for giving me an opportunity. If you're a Mansfield Fellow in the room, can you raise your hand? There are some.
Well,
Mansfield Fellows, more than 200 alumni, the vast majority remain in government for careers of 20, 30 years, and they form the human capital that helps these two nations work together to solve problems. And we're so proud that the Trump administration is sustaining this program. We are now in our 30th year. It's a remarkable commitment by both the government of Japan and the U.S. government to building the kinds of trusting relationship that allows the two nations to pursue common interests together. And yes, the Mansfield Fellows are special people, and they are part of that fabric of community that Ambassador Yamada and Ambassador Sasai and Kurt Tong spoke about that solve problems.
okay, thank you. Kazuyo-san, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. It's an honor to be part of this stage, sharing it with Ms. Doden, Ricki, Frank, and Jessyca. Our organization is celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. We were created in 1975 in New York as an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. And today we have staff in Washington, D.C. as well, including myself. Our roots, unlike Mansfield, is in Japan. Our founder was a Japanese pioneer of people-to-people diplomacy and U.S.-Japan legislative dialogues in the 1960s, and he created our U.S. entity to partner with our sister organization in Tokyo to strengthen U.S.-Japan relations together. And so we created lasting initiatives such as our Japan program for U.S. congressional staff, which seeks to deepen their understanding of the U.S.-Japan relationship. And as the U.S.-Japan alliance matured, so did our programs to facilitate U.S.-Japan cooperation on shared areas of interest and need, such as global health, healthy aging, democratic governance in Asia, and what we call multicultural coexistence. These are all themes that are founded on what we believe are our shared values. And unlike think tanks with in-house experts, we work as a professional facilitator of policy dialogues and exchanges, and we engage current and future leaders in government and other sectors, sometimes national level policy professionals, but some of our programs also connect community level leaders, such as our program on healthy aging. We like to see policy impact from our work. So for example, our program on democracy facilitated the launch of a new multi-party caucus in the Japanese Diet to promote universal values in the Indo-Pacific, which was followed by subsequent introduction of a bipartisan resolution in the U.S. House of Representatives commending the launch. And I'll end with a note on who support us, because we can't do our work without them. We have been funded primarily by foundation and government grants and some corporate and individual donors, and we want more of them.
True. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It's nice to see everyone, and it's nice to be here with all of you. Thank you. I always think everybody knows about the JET program because I'm so steeped in it, but I just wanted to share a little bit about who our community is. We're not maybe your standard or traditional exchange program, in that we are the community of people after the exchange program. So the Japan Exchange and Teaching Program is a Japanese government program, and it draws college graduates from all over the world to work in public schools and municipal offices. And then we collectively call ourselves JETs because it's much easier that way. About 90% of JETs work in the public school systems as assistant language teachers, and the remaining 10% are coordinators for international relations, and they're working in the municipal offices. But both of these positions have the large responsibility of being ambassadors for the United States. A majority of JETs are placed in rural or suburban areas throughout Japan, where global exposure is often quite limited. There are typically about 5,000 JETs in Japan each year, and about half of those participants are U.S. citizens. So the U.S. Japan Exchange and Teaching Program Alumni Association, or USJDA, because it's much faster that way. So we are the nonprofit institution for U.S. citizens who have participated on the JET program. The JET program itself is coming up on its 40th year, and therefore we now have 40 years of participants or alumni. So this has now translated to a JET alumni network that includes 19 JET AA chapters throughout the United States. And roughly, I know, Kurt, you said 40,000, but there's even more of us now. There's about 45,000 of us spread across the United States. And most JETs have established really deep personal connections with Japan through their time on the JET program, and that continues to play a role in their personal and their professional lives. So as you can see, many go on to lead and play support roles in Japan-related programs, organizations, institutions, businesses, and grassroots efforts that help to strengthen and expand U.S.-Japan ties and friendships. And I know there's a lot of overlap between JETs and the other organizations that are represented up here. So this JET AA community alone hosts about 600 to 700 Japan-related events and gatherings each year throughout the United States. US JET AA fosters that passion. So we're providing the opportunities, the programming, the network for continued engagement after their time on this program concludes. So it's fairly safe to say that really anywhere you see an intersection between the US and Japan, you'll also find a JET alum. And I would love my JET alums that are out there to raise their hands. I know there's a few in the audience.
Wow.
So you can see, even in this small room, how well we're represented.
And you yourself is one.
Of course. I'm proud Hokkaido from 2003 to 2006. So I think looking ahead, really, our vision is for JETs to be able to use the skills and the competencies that they gained through the JET program experience to remain lifelong, and I feel like that's really a key word here, lifelong participants in an interconnected network that continues to reinforce the U.S.-Japan relationship through multi-dimensional ties. I'll leave it there.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. All your comments were very inspiring, and they told us very much about the evolution of your organizations and the work that you do. And I noticed that the passion that comes through all of you as well. But your organization accumulated expertise and experience over the years for decades. But I'm wondering what is needed to make sure that the programs that you do, like the exchange programs, endure ties and relationships rather than like functioning as one-off event. How do you make sure that whether it be the change of governments and things, how do you ensure the consistency in the work that you do? Ricki?
We have a lot of volunteers in Sister Cities International who have been part of Sister Cities International since they were teenagers and participated in youth exchanges. So that continuity and consistency certainly makes a huge difference. We also have a really strong staff at our headquarters here in DC who focus every day on making sure that new sister city partnerships are formed, but also making sure that those that have been around a long time that maybe aren't as active as they could be, who may even have become dormant over time, that they are revitalized. And we do what we call boots on the ground calls. And those boots on the ground calls are Zoom meetings between municipal officials and Sister Cities International volunteers and anyone else they want to be on the call, such as their visitor center or any other community individual that they want to be on the call. And then on our side, usually I'll participate in the calls along with our membership manager and our state representatives. Each state has a state representative who helps oversee the programs in their state. Those boots on the ground calls have had an 82% success rate of gaining members and keeping members, because when you're out in the community somewhere, you don't really feel a strong connection with your national organization unless the national organization makes it a point to connect regularly with you. And we have made a point of doing that through those boots on the ground calls. We've also developed toolkits to help cities maintain their strength and stability in their partnerships. Our state reps spent several years creating toolkits that teach you how to do everything from start a sister city to reviving a dormant one, or starting a sports diplomacy program, or maybe even building an economic development project in your city. And there are numerous examples of those that we can talk about at some point. But those toolkits have been vital in maintaining the strength of Sister Cities International, and I think it involves, to a large extent, just maintaining the communication and the support for those sister city partnerships around the world.
Evolve, but maintain the continuity. Anybody else want to, please? Oh, then Frank, and then Kazuyo-san.
Yes, your question goes to the core of international exchange and how it can be sustainable. And of course, the glib answer is to say, well, it takes resources. And resources are important. Foundations like the Mansfield Foundation and organizations like JCIE survive on the strength of corporate support, individual support, as well as government grants. But I would say that the key to getting that support is about deep personal connections rather than one-off events. And this is not a dig on think tanks. Think tanks are very important, and they shine a spotlight on important issues. But sometimes they might convene a conference to study a really important topic like cybersecurity. And they get a bunch of really smart people in the room, and they shine a spotlight on a problem and on some of the solutions. But then the conference is over and everybody goes home. And that is not what the Mansfield Foundation does. You know, our Mansfield way, and Aiko has been a participant, so she can, I hope, validate this, begins not with the issue, but with the people involved. We use our convening power to assemble people in places like Glacier National Park. And we might spend the first day hiking, and we might spend that evening, having bison burgers and a local homebrew. And then the next morning, we start to talk about the issue. And by the end of the weekend, we don't just have insights into the topic and the challenge, but we also have begun to form a community. And that community is what is essential for the sustainability of the international exchange programs, because it's not just a connection that is academic, it's a personal touch. And it is those personal connections are the ones that also convince, hopefully, the legislators and the corporate executives to see value in what we do, which then drives the resources to sustain our work.
Right, right.
Thank you. I was just thinking about successful lasting exchange programs from the past, and I mentioned the U.S.-Japan legislative dialogues in the 1960s that our founder began, which is famously called the Shimoda Conference. And I think about why it was successful, and I think the lesson I draw there is that you had one very dedicated individual who kept working at it, and so one lesson from that for our organization is we try to invest in the relationship long-term as well, and try to remain our alumni's key resource for all things Japan-related and provide future opportunities for them to engage in the relationship. And I'm so glad to see one of our congressional staff, Jamari, participating today, for example. And the other lesson is we need to nurture leaders like him and to bring together the entire community, because one of the challenges I think in having enduring relationships as building one as a community is we have many separate initiatives by different organizations that sometimes compete, but I think if we can combine our efforts, that would be great, but doing that requires a strong leader.
I want to come back to something that Frank mentioned, and I think is very important, and that's that cultural exchange has to be meaningful in the very experience of it. So just, so sharing an experience, working towards the solution of some sort of problem, having something where there's purposeful interaction with the other party, I think that's what really creates meaningful cultural exchange, and I think that's what inspires people to stay engaged with it. And then Ricki mentioned how she has this kind of volunteer army, shall we say, running sister cities. And I think we're very similar at USJDA, and that, you know, we have these 19 chapters, but they're completely volunteer run. All of the leadership is volunteer, all of the engagement is volunteer. So we have a huge number of people across the United States. But the reason that they are volunteering is because they have had such a meaningful and personal experience that has inspired them to stay engaged. But we, as an organization, USJDA, it's our responsibility to continue to facilitate that same meaningful and deep experience. And so the way, going back to your question, Aiko, about how do you sustain your organization, and I think for us, it's through creating opportunities and programming that allows all of our members, all of our alumni, to continue to stay involved in a way that is meaningful for them. So it has to be purposeful, and it has to have a social aspect, like you were talking about, Frank, sitting around having, we don't do bison burgers, we usually do some sort of izakaya food, but you know, same idea. But it has to have both kind of a purpose, whether that's learning together or solving a problem together, or you know, some sort of interactive purpose, and it has to have a social aspect. And that's how you get these volunteer-run organizations, or really any organization, to continue to sustain.
Okay. There was a question from the registered participants which really touched upon many of the issues that you have all articulated. The question was precisely what are some programs or initiatives that you would consider to be most beneficial to further cross-cultural understanding communication currently, and how might Japan and the US further develop grassroots bilateral relations that supersede turbulent administrative policy and change, but rather is rooted in long-lasting people-to-people connection and cross-cultural engagement between communities within the nations. So I think your responses have already, partly or mostly, answered this question as well. I wondered, though, if you might, any of you might, to follow up on this question and go on to address like building communities. It might be communities among your like JET alumni or participants of the Mansfield Foundation or JCIE past participants or cities who engage in the Sister Cities programs. But there are like communities out there, the local maybe towns or schools or governments or that are also host families perhaps also engaged. Would I be right in saying that maybe? I wondered if you could elaborate on your notion of building the community that supports the program.
So you're just asking for specific examples, basically?
Oh,
yeah?
whatever you'd like to share with us.
I think that so when you think about building these types of communities, and you want to engage as many people as possible, I think it's important to kind of think beyond exchange as just between two countries, right? It goes beyond being just Japan and the United States, and I guess I'm thinking about it from the alumni perspective, and that we're also engaging the alumni to interact with each other, and they almost become their local spokespeople for Japan. They all come back. With 45,000 of us, we're in small towns all across the United States. We're also in big cities all across the United States. And we're also, we're often identified amongst our coworkers, our peers, as sort of the Japan expert, whether or not we're an expert. But that's often how we're seen. And so I think this notion of exchange goes beyond that. It goes, we bring Japan back with us, and we become a spokesperson for Japan. And so that in itself is a type of exchange, right? I'm not Japanese, but all of my friends know that I'm sort of the person to come ask about anything that might be Japan related, whether it's politics, whether it's sake, whether it's sumo, whether it's lacquerware, somehow I get all the questions, right? And so that in itself is a type of exchange that I think, just to think beyond the borders. And so when you ask the question about building communities, the communities can be between two countries, but it can also be in your specific locale as well. And so working with the knowledge that you have, working with the resources that you have at your disposal, and continuing to build those communities on a very local level is, I think, just as important as, reaching across the oceans sometimes.
Right. And that's something that AIs can't do.
I was going to add to that sometimes our sister city partnerships come out of a diaspora in a particular community. That has happened on many occasions where a group from another country makes up a large portion of the population of the city in the United States, and they have a tremendous interest in building a partnership with their own country. And so one example, which may surprise you, is there's a large Polish diaspora in Sedona, Arizona. And they have been very, very interested in building partnerships with cities in Poland. So it's very interesting how those communities form and how they can then be parlayed into a sister city partnership.
Thank you. Frank, please.
Just briefly to add, I think that this notion of building community is so important. And when I think about it, I think about weaving and fabric, because you can have a single thread of great strength, and that's one way to think about building connections, is a single thread of great resilience and strength. But most threads are vulnerable to breakage, and they're stronger when woven together with other threads into a fabric. And this panel represents, I think, different strands of thread, which when woven together into a fabric are much stronger than individuals. So, the Mansfield Foundation, we employ JETs, a large number of JETs working for me. You're helping strengthen our programming. we engage between Montana and Kumamoto because we have a sister state relationship and then there's sister city relationships, so that when we are recruiting our program participants, where are we sending them? We're not sending them randomly to Japan. We're sending them to places where we have already some fabric of community, some bridge already in connection. And with JCIE, when we're sending legislators to Japan, we're building a network of legislators who have participated in legislative and congressional staff dialogue exchanges. We're not the only organization doing that. We're working in partnership with JCIE. So the whole point being just that, you know, it is when you weave these things together that you build a more resilient community. And dare I say it, in today's age, I will say it, a diverse community. One that is inclusive and broad, and in its diversity finds strength because of the many different points of view and the many different elements that go into that fabric.
Okay. Thank you. And Kazuyo-san, you've once told me that you try to engage the first-time visitors to Japan, not just the kind of old hand who already have knowledge and experience about interacting with Japan. That also contributes to building the community, I believe.
Yes, newcomers to U.S.-Japan relations for sure. So we intentionally pick people who have not been exposed to Japan as much. But I think another way we designed the program is addressing cross-sectoral issues. So issues like healthy aging involves not just policy experts, but businesses and caregivers and people who, many different kinds of community leaders. So that's one thing one point I might add.
Okay. Some of you have spoken about the next generation, younger generation participation, and there was a question from the registered participants regarding that as well. The person asks, for young professionals and recent college graduates seeking to develop a career out of supporting the U.S.-Japan partnership on either a national or subnational level, what would you recommend? What would your recommendation be to someone in getting involved at an entry level in such a harsh job market? And where might one begin that search? Is there a localized database for young professionals to access and share such opportunities? It's a very, very practical question.
I can talk about that because we are very focused on the next generation, and we offer some programming at Sister Cities International that is helping to develop the next generation. One of those programs is called the Youth Leadership Summit, and we bring young people between the ages of 14 and 18 to DC for a week and house them at American University, and they get immersed for a week in everything from leadership to personal development to diplomacy. And the highlight of that week is a diplomacy simulation at the State Department, where they actually participate in a diplomatic simulation. And it is fascinating to watch them grow from this gawky teenager who arrives on Sunday to a diplomat who walks out of the door on Friday. And so any kind of training like that, I think, is beneficial. Our youth ambassadors that have been in Japan for the past 6 months were 19 to 27 years old, and they were from 47 states. Some of them spoke as many as 6 languages, and they had the opportunity not only to expand their language ability, but they had the opportunity to develop their customer service skills and their diplomatic skills, and they had the opportunity to meet ambassadors and other public officials. All those things that young people can do as they're growing up will develop the skills that they will need to become, whether it's a professional diplomat or whether it's a citizen diplomat. They're learning the skills that will help them to serve in those roles. We also have interns in our office from the various universities in the DC area, And we are delighted to have those interns because we benefit from them and they get enormous experience and skill development in the area of diplomacy.
Okay. So they are de facto future community builders then?
They are, absolutely. And most of them will stay with it throughout their life.
True. But Jessyca, I had a question about the community or the networking that you had told me before of the organizations that share values and missions, but tend to be kind of at times holed up in silos.
Yeah.
What if you put your forces together?
Well, first I want to speak to the previous question about being kind of entry level and how to break in, because this is something that I deal with a lot. Every year we have about 1,000 or so jets that come back, and they all want jobs, and they all want jobs that have to do with Japan because of how much they've fallen in love with the country. And so I think, my first piece of advice would be to use the networks that you have at your disposal, all of your networks, your alumni associations from your universities, any programs that you've been involved in, whether it's JET, whether it's Tomodachi, whatever it might be, use those. That's the beginning of your networking foundation. And then the second, which Ricki sort of touched on, is volunteer. And I know that volunteering doesn't pay the bills. It's okay to work at your local grocery store or whatever it is you have to do on the side to pay the bills while you're doing what you actually want to do. That's okay. We've all done it, and it's completely acceptable. But volunteer. Get involved in any local Japan-related organization or event that you can. And conferences are a great way to get involved, because you can volunteer at the conference and then you don't have to pay the entry fee, because I think a lot of the young people don't have the money for those entry fees, but you get to meet all of the really fantastic people that are the speakers and that are the movers and the shakers. So that would be my practical advice for getting in.
Okay. And my following question regarding building the sort of network or community amongst yourself, what suggestions might you have?
Yeah, I think all of us, I think all four of us probably sitting up here have experienced this, but we're all doing such important work, and we all have really niche audiences that we're serving. So, you look across the US-Japan landscape, and there's so many different organizations out there, but we're all really serving a mission that's important. And I think while there is a lot of overlap in sort of, what we're trying to achieve, we are all doing it kind of from our own perspectives and our own vantage points. But because we're so focused on the day-to-day and getting everything, there's taxes to file, there's emails to answer, there's all these kind of practical day-to-day things. It's really hard to look up and see what everyone else is doing on as far as which initiatives they're pushing forward or what priorities are actually on the docket for this year and how we can work together. And so, there are for sure organizations like NAJAS has done a really great job of trying to bring people together. Colcon is another one that has, really worked hard to bring, to sort of be a convener. But all of these other organizations have their own missions and their own capacity issues as well. They can't spend 100% of the time, convening all of these, tens of 30, even where I live in Denver, there's 20 different, Japan-related organizations. I can't even imagine how many there are here in Washington, D.C. But so to have, some sort of a body that their sole purpose is really to convene all of these organizations on a regular basis and help us understand what each other is working on, and also to drive sort of national level or international level initiatives that need to be addressed so that we can all work on them, cooperatively as well. I think something at that level would be quite transformative for our impact on U.S.-Japan relations in general.
So what you have in your mind is something that's sort of a dedicated, separate secretariat sort of.
Yeah, that would be amazing. If we, right? If we had one institution whose main job was really just to coordinate and help communicate and be a convener for all of us that are out there doing our work. Because I consider my work to be a huge priority and very important, and I'm sure Kazuyo and Frank and Ricki consider the same things, right? And all the work that we are doing is that important. But I don't know what Ricki is doing all the time. I don't know what Frank is doing all the time. They don't know what I'm doing all the time. And so if we had, a dedicated body that was really just to help convene and to help facilitate informing what the priorities were, then I think that would just, that would just open up a whole world of being able to make progress in a way that we haven't as a greater institution, of U.S.-Japan related organizations.
There was a big nod from Frank.
Well, I was just going to say, if it's any consolation, half the time I don't know what I'm doing, much less what other organizations are doing. And this is a challenge, getting out of our stovepipes a shout out to the organizers of today's event. This is one of those opportunities we have to sort of, raise the gaze and look out a little bit and see what other organizations are doing. Paige Cottingham Streeter's here somewhere, Japan-U.S. Friendship Commission, Colcon you mentioned. There are organizations that try to facilitate and coordinate, but it's always going to be a balance because most of us are pretty consumed in our daily lives. And then, spending time and energy to coordinate is hard. But events such as this remind us of why it's important, because we are stronger together and our missions can be mutually supportive. And that fabric is stronger when it's woven together. So, I don't know if we need to create a new organization or so much as we need to ensure that events such as the one being sponsored today happen regularly and that we attend them and that we network together and support each other.
True. I've already seen so many conversations happening in the corridors and things, and I think there'll be more of that during the coffee breaks as well on the sideline. My last question for this panel would be, because our next panel after the break will focus on policy on tourism and culture that foster international exchange. Based on your experience interacting with the people as well as the government, any particular policies or support you think might be effective in achieving this goal from all of you? Who would like to go first? Jessyca? No? Thinking. Well, what about you, Ricki?
I do think that we should probably be working more closely together in order to get this very important work done. I do think, too, that the cultural events and the student exchanges and the economic development projects that Sister Cities is working on all are making such a difference in bringing peace to the world. When you can send a 15-year-old to Japan or another country for an educational exchange, when you can bring 15,000 people to Rockville, Maryland for a bubble tea festival, or you can bring artisans from Uzbekistan to Santa Fe, New Mexico to sell their beautiful works of art and interact with the people of the U.S. community that has embraced them. Every one of these activities, I think, brings us closer together as countries and brings our people together and gives us a much better understanding of the culture of these other countries. And I'll give you just a quick example.
I think we don't have much time. So
Okay, that's okay. Thank you.
Just briefly, this was one of the questions that was provided to the panel in advance, so I actually had a chance to sort of think about it a little bit in advance. And I want to switch from fabrics to gardening, because really what you're talking about is how you sow the seeds. And whenever I interview a new prospective employee at the Mansfield Foundation, one of my first questions is, what was your first spark? What was the germ that grew into this plant that cares about U.S. and Asia? And it's a good segue maybe to the second panel, because it's very often some cultural or tourist experience. It might be anime, or it might be manga, or it might be music, it might be a food. But the grass tips that I'm working with at the Mansfield Foundation, they started in the ground as seeds that were nurtured often through a early life experience. So I'll give a shout out to my wife, who runs a nonprofit in Baltimore called Be More Global. So they take junior high school students overseas for their first trip abroad, right? And they're 13 years old, and their brains are full of curious questions and energy, and they come back from those trips transformed in their understanding of who they are as people, what Baltimore is as a city, and whatever foreign country it is that they went to. And so the short answer to your question, I think it's about early connection, early exposure to foreign culture, language, through either tourism, food, arts. That's the spark. Okay. And then we get the experts later.
Okay, thank you.
So the question is, what can governments do
to
support tourism culture? Very broadly speaking, I think culture, if it's attractive to others, obviously it's your strength. So if that's country's strength, so then naturally I would like to see governments invest in their developing an attractive culture. And I think I'm lucky in fostering U.S.-Japan relations, because Japan is a very easy country to convey its strength through its culture, whether it's anime or mascots or food. Once you get exposed to Japanese culture, people sort of interpret that as Japanese strengths, and that brings people closer to Japan. But that's sort of the broader thought I had. But I do have a question for the next panel about tourism. And we know that tourism has grown exponentially in Japan and some other countries, but it has also become associated with disrespectful behavior and have led to anti-foreigner sentiments, becoming more of a problem than a solution, it seems. So I would be curious to know what experts think about how to address that issue of excess or over tourism so that it can become a positive influence on international relations.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to jump in and say that I think tourism and cultural exchange are absolutely, what creates a more globalized and globally in touch next generation. But it also has to be accessible, and not everybody has the means and the resources to go abroad. And so there's kind of been this little bit of sprinkling talk of AI, and so I know that we all probably in this room can agree that these really human, like three-dimensional interactions are really what cultural exchange and those people-to-people relationships are built on. But when you have people that can't access that type of cultural exchange, I think we do need to look at other ways to facilitate these types of interactions. And that doesn't mean that everything has to happen on Zoom, but we need to be creative as humans to think outside the box now that we have AI, now that we have all of this, all of these other things that are kind of coming online. How do we utilize them to make cultural exchange more accessible for the people that can't actually get to that country in the flesh?
True. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our panelists. I think, like many of you, I do have more respect on your continued work over the years, regardless of the changes that are happening around us. And the views on the future prospects of international exchange illuminated how we may overcome challenges. And that process of addressing the challenges, like Jessyca mentioned, and be creative about it, in themselves contributes to strengthening the Japan-US relations, I thought. And during the next panel, we'll be discussing about some of the recommendations and the ideas that were discussed in this panel. So everybody, please give a big round of applause to our panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you again to Ms. Doden and all our panelists. We will now have a 10-minute coffee break in the foyer. We continue to welcome your thoughts of this event on our survey, and we'll alert you when it's time to return to your seats. We hope you can join us for our second panel. Thank you.